Welcome, everyone, to the Gifts of God program. We're so happy to have you with us today. It's a gray day in Washington. We've had a lot of those, but the sun shines inside of us. I wanted to talk further this week about grace, but also this last section we did a podcast on, which was a new chapter about perception. There was this paragraph that was so beautiful, and the first section was the song Forgotten, right? That was the name of it. And then it was talking about how the world we see is definitely determined by the thoughts we think. So most of us were taught the world is what the world is, and then you observe it, and then you form conclusions about it. So it's like we see, then we take it in, and then we assess what we see, and then we make some kind of judgment about that. Well, that's the ego's version of seeing, right? What the section was trying to get across was it's the other way around. We have a thought of what we want to see, and then we project that thought out, and then the world gives us a demonstration of that. So it's actually reversed. It's actually reversed. So when we get the true vision, we see that whatever we're going to perceive out there first begins in here. So it's another way of saying all thought produces a result. And that if you ever want to make a change, you have to change the thought first before you see the result out in the physical world. So you have dominion over your thoughts. Of course you do. You know, there's a very powerful lesson. It's like 2:36. I rule my mind, which I alone must rule. I rule my mind, which I alone must rule. Well, what's that mean? That means like the world you see is ruled by whatever you're holding in your mind. And if you cannot rule your mind, if you're not paying attention to what's in your mind, then you just get what you see, and then you think that you have no control over that, and then you think, oh, if it's something that you bump into and you get a result you don't want, then it's very easy to feel like you're a victim of circumstances beyond your control. You know, we've all done this at some point in our life. We've all been victims of circumstances we felt were beyond our control. But in fact, they were in our control. And in fact, they were attracted by the thoughts we have in our mind. And you know, it's like, okay, people with catastrophic thinking say, well, what if there's an earthquake and, your building collapses? Well, if you're thinking the right thoughts, you will never be in that place where there's an earthquake, where the building collapses, right? So it's like that's not in your thinking. You don't have catastrophic thinking. At some point of doing this work, you see that, well, my fear is my responsibility. And that fear has a very attractive power. So it's my responsibility, if I'm feeling a fear, to process it and dissolve it, not just let it go on, So this catastrophic thinking, a lot of people come to us with all their problems, and we tell them, well, because there's this fear of the future, right? What's the future going to hold? I don't know. Well, it doesn't. I don't trust that things are going to be taken care of in my future. And then, therefore, you have a lot of fear, and therefore you have what we call catastrophic thinking. You think bad things are going to happen. My mother was a master of catastrophic thinking. She was a sweet lady. I mean, don't get me wrong. She was a very loving, sweet, wonderful person. But she had so many fears about what could go wrong in the future. What could go wrong if you travel too far outside your comfort zone? What could go wrong if you're traveling around the world like Sandra and me in other continents, other countries? So she had a lot of fears. And a lot of us, if we're really honest, we have a few of them ourselves. We have a few of them ourselves. So how can we get to this state of grace if we have all this fear going on? And then how can we overcome the fear if we're not handling the thoughts in our mind? Because we think it's the external situation that is dangerous or meritorious of our concern. And if it's really serious, it might escalate into fear. But even concern is a fear. Even concern. It's like an attack on God's plan for salvation, concern. So not that you wouldn't be attentive and handling things in a detailed way or in a responsible way. There's a difference. There's a difference between that and being worried and concerned and thinking that something bad is going to happen or might go wrong. It's like Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And so we want to get free of that kind of mindset. And that's what this Forgotten Song section was starting out saying. It was saying, well, your mind determines everything. And then it said something very interesting. You only have two choices in how you're going to organize your mind. And the two choices are judgment or vision. So basically what it was saying was you can either be stuck in the ego's thought system, which is primarily based on judgment, or you can be in the Holy Spirit's thought system that has vision or Christ's vision, let's say. Now, there are two fundamental differences between those two. And one, judgment identifies with the physical dimension. It's like the judgment of the ego is very determined to identify you with your body, with this physical dimension, right? What you can see, what you can taste, what you can smell, what you can hear, what you can touch. That's that's your basis on, quote unquote, what you're basing your perception on. But that's a little faulty or deceptive in that it still doesn't see that what you see, what you taste, what you feel, what you smell, what you hear is still attracted by what you're thinking. That is not physical. It's not of the body. It's in your mind, right? And then what we have in the mind is judgment. Well, I don't like to go into this neighborhood because there are this kind of people living there. Oh, I don't like to go to that restaurant. It's too noisy. You know, I don't like to be with this person. They don't have a spiritual life. You know, we can make all kinds of judgments, and they're wrong because they're based on the perception of the body. You know, there's a lesson in the Course that says the body's eyes do not perceive the light. The body's eyes do not perceive the light. So the vision that the Course is trying to lead us to is some kind of vision beyond the body in this so-called light, right? So if we could put our minds in the light, we could see, we could truly see, we could have the vision, okay? If we could put our minds in the light, we could have the vision and we wouldn't be using judgment. But as long as we're not making that step, we are using judgment. And that keeps us kind of caught in our ego. Now, I'm not making the ego a bad person. You know, we all need an ego to drive our car, to go to the grocery, to, you know, make a spreadsheet, to type on our computer. We all need an ego. We all need a body to exist in this physical dimension where we are here as humans. And there's a function that has. But it's like when we identify too much with it and we don't see that it's a means to an end, it's not the end, it's just a means, then we get a little bit wacky. And that's what the Course is trying to liberate us from, is this judgment of the ego that is so focused on the physical dimension, so focused on the body, so focused on all the fine incremental judgments we make about everything. And you know, if you're more sophisticated and educated, it's like your ego is also more sophisticated and it can make very fine distinctions, very fine judgments that are, you know, in their own way kind of beautiful indeed, you know, to think of things in that subtle of a way. So the ego can be very subtle. It can be very, eloquent in its assessment. It can be very sophisticated, but it also can totally miss the point. Totally miss the point. You know, like Socrates was this enlightened being in Greece, and you know, the writer Plato wrote about Socrates. Socrates was Plato's spiritual master. He was Socrates's guru, basically. And Socrates never wrote anything down, just like Jesus never wrote anything down. He didn't bother with that. He was just totally in the life stream. And it's like Alma. She never writes anything down. All the books that are her words are written by other people, that are devoted and are a witness to her amazing connection to this spiritual dimension, right? Okay, so anyhow, Socrates was accused by many members of the community as quote unquote corrupting the youth, because he had a lot of young students, Plato being one of them, and they were just, at his feet and enamored at the truth of what he was saying. And he was liberating souls, he was like getting them to step outside of the ego into this other dimension, right? So, and he was very good at it. And he used language. He used, in philosophy, they call it logic. He had an impeccable command of logic, so that he could prove certain things, certain spiritual truths, very well with argument and logic. Well, okay. So at the end, the community fathers didn't like that he had so much control over their sons, and they put him on trial. And who were the people trying him? They were called sophists. The sophists. They were like the lawyers, the people that were, in the upper echelons of government. They were called the sophists. And we have the word sophistication. The root word of the word sophistication came from the same root as the word sophists, and they were the lawyers. Please don't take this personally, Brenda. So Socrates said, well, the problem with the sophists is they are so eloquent in their command of the language, they can make the truth seem false and the false seem true. And they don't really have a grounding of the truth, but because they're so sophisticated, that's why they're called the sophists, they can make any argument seem true. They're that good at it, right? So anyhow, these sophists were the ones who tried Socrates. And in the end, Socrates was trying to say that we don't know the truth. We don't know. We get to the point where mental logic, thought itself that the brain makes up, is a limitation. And in order to access higher states of being, you have to leave behind all those sophisticated arguments of the brain. You have to leave it all behind. So at some point, you have to enter the unknown, where you're just like kind of boundless, like you're not tied to anything. And that can be scary. Like, very few people have stepped outside of the ego in this lifetime, right? But Socrates is now saying, yes, but in order to access absolute truth, you have to go beyond the brain. You have to go beyond language. You have to go beyond your logic. And that state, as far as we're concerned, in this dimension we're in, is unknown. We don't know it. We have to leave behind what we know in order to get there. Well, so of course they didn't care about that being true or not true. They just wanted to get rid of Socrates, right? Because he was a thorn in their side. Well, so eventually they they found him guilty of, I don't know, corrupting the youth or social sedition or something, and they sentenced him to death. And so then, okay, so he's sitting in the jail, and some of his students kind of came to see him, and they said, we can break you out of here. We can get you out of this jail. So why don't you come with us? And Socrates said, no, it's okay. I've led a good life. I don't fear that, leaving my body. I don't fear that, and it's okay. So, and I've given you guys enough of my teaching and our wonderful times together, our heartfelt times together, and that'll be my gift to you. And nobody can ever take that away from you. You have that. So it's my time, and it's okay. So anyhow, he took the hemlock, and that was it. But why are we still talking about him 2,500 years later? He's taught in all colleges and philosophy classes. And I mean, you can't take a philosophy class without reading Plato and about Socrates. Just like, you can't study world religions without considering Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha. These were great beings, and they ascended into other dimensions in their mind, their own mind, that made contact with these higher realities. And that was a direct contact. So my friend Barbara, who's one of my editors, she edits our books, and she's very good at it. And we met her in Nashville when we lived there, and she's still, editing our books. And she's what I would call my devil's advocate, right, for spirituality. Is she has such a sharp mind. So when I was telling her we were going to get a hug from Amma, she was like questioning me, like, well, what is that about? What is that exactly? And so then I was telling her, when you go up and you get your hug from Amma, it's like your brain just shuts off. She takes you into another dimension beyond the body, that's so blissful, so peaceful, so elevated. You're like in this ecstasy of pure love, and you feel it. It's not, you're not making this up. You actually feel it. And then when you actually get your hug, and she's actually touching you and whispering mantras in your ear, it's like that. That's the final dissolution of your ego, right? And you just totally let go. You just totally let go, and you're in this other space, this other dimension. And now, not only does she do it for you who are going to get the hug, but she may be doing that for 20,000 more people in the day. She just hugs one after another, and you see, wow, the whole hall is got at least a few thousand people in it, and she's going to hug everybody in that hall that day. And they have it set up efficiently enough that it goes very smoothly. So then, Barbara's kind of questioning me. Well, what do you mean by like leaving the body? And the Course says the body, we're not a body, but the body is a communication device It calls it a communication device. So in order for me to communicate to you and you to communicate to me in this dimension, we need this device, right? I need a mouth and I need English words. And if you were Chinese, I'd need a translator. But I still need this physical vehicle to do stuff and communicate stuff. Now, the communication comes from somewhere else, though. The communication is not a physical thing. Now, we use the body to communicate it, whatever that is, that end of separation, let's call it, the end of separation. And this is one of the main problems the Course is trying to get us over, right? We're stuck in separation. We think there's a me and I, and this me and I is separate from you, and there's a God, and I am separate from that. And so separation is the main problem, all right? So we're trying to get over that. And bodies can't get you over that. Obviously, we marry other bodies and we say we're in love with them, and then 20 years later we say we hate them. And so, well, did you really end the separation? You got a divorce and now you're really separated. So no, the bodies can't heal the separation. So what does then? What does? And then why does it feel like when you get a hug for Amma, you have ended the separation? She's using her physical body to hug you, and you have a physical body that's getting hugged, and there's something in that exchange using those communication devices, her body and your body, that does something. But the actual communication is something beyond the body. You have a being who's absolutely certain who she is. She lives in the realm of I am spirit. There's that lesson 97, I am spirit. That's a statement of self-identity. Any I am statement is a statement of self-identity. So there you have it. I am spirit. All right. She abides in her awareness in that dimension of spirit, which is the unknown. It's like what Socrates was saying. It's a dimension beyond thought, beyond the known. Krishnamurti said the same thing. He even wrote a book, Freedom from the Known. Freedom from the Known. You should pick that up. So Krishnamurti was fully there, fully enlightened. And he said, you cannot find the answers in the known. Well, so a being like Amma, she lives outside of that known space, right? She's there all the time. I don't even think she comes down from there. But when she's giving you a hug, she brings you and your mind and your being up into that space of the truth of who you are as God created you. You are spirit. And now it's not like her spirit and then there's your spirit. No, when you get in that dimension, you and Amaji are one. There's no separation. And she brings you up into that dimension where there's no separation, none, not one iota of separation. And so your mind is blown. You feel this euphoria, this kind of gratitude for what you've been given. It's all very perfect, all very perfect. And it's unforgettable. You would never forget that. Now, you might have to go back down in your everyday life and deal with all the whatevers, you know, all the people, all the things, all the places that you have to go around in who are totally unaware of that and don't even care about that, right? And then you've got to love them anyway. Like, it doesn't matter that they're not in that space. You got to love them anyway, you know. But, you know, I remember this Robert Bly, I don't know if I could find it now. It was a little cassette tape. He had these readings of Kabir. Kabir was an enlightened being from India, and he wasn't really Hindu. He wasn't really a Sikh. He wasn't really a Muslim. He was just a man who was enlightened. And then he was talking about this state, you know, where you transcend the body and you're in this dimension, right, of the light, of the peace, of the joy. And he said, 5 seconds of that are worth your whole life. Like, if you chance upon that experience, right, and you know you're absolutely liberated and you're in this ecstatic oneness. And he said, well, if you experience that for 5 seconds, it's worth your whole life. Well, why? Because it's so profound and it's like nectar, you know, it's like nectar is some kind of distilled, sweet drink, sustenance. It's so distilled. It's like divinely distilled. And they use that word nectar a lot in Indian scriptures, the nectar, you know, the amrit, they call it, amrit. And that nectar, it's so unforgettable. When you've tasted that, it's like nothing will ever satisfy you like that again, ever. And you've had the experience, so you won't forget it. And you may have to deal with your everyday life, and that's okay. And you may not taste the nectar much, but when you do taste it, it sustains you for years. It doesn't matter that you just the memory of that nectar is enough to make you happy, right? So that's kind of what it's like with getting a hug from Amma. And that's what it's like, I think, as a student of A Course in Miracles. There are certain phrases, there are certain passages that if we really get it, I mean really get it, and like have immense gratitude that we could even be told these things, and who is telling them to us, and how could we receive it, and how could it even show up in our life? And then there it is, like right in front of us, and we just read it, and it's like we can hardly believe it, but there it is, and we just read it. And can we have the ears to hear? Can we have the ears to hear? Can we have the ears to take it in? Can we be present enough? It's like Amaji's hug, you know, can we show up and let everything else go, drop everything else? Don't take one thing with you when you go up on that stage and get your hug from Amaji. And the more you can let go, the more you will receive her grace. And that's the grace. So I want to read this passage And it's from this podcast we did last night, and I sent it out to you guys. So hang on a second. I can put my finger on it really fast here. Okay. So this is from chapter 21, Reason and Perception. And this is from the first section, The Forgotten Song. It says, listen and see if you remember an ancient song you knew so long ago and held more dear than any melody you taught yourself to cherish since. Beyond the body, beyond the sun and stars, past everything you see, and yet somehow familiar, is an arc of golden light that stretches as you look into a great and shining circle. And all the circle fills with light before your eyes. The edges of the circle disappear, and what is in it is no longer contained at all. The light expands and covers everything, extending to infinity, forever shining and with no break or limit anywhere. Within it, everything is joined in perfect continuity. Nor is it possible to imagine that anything could be outside, for there is nowhere that this light is not. I told Sandra when we were doing the podcast, I said, we could frame that. That's like, oh man, if you put yourself in there, in that one paragraph, you wouldn't have to worry about anything. All your problems, put it in there. All your concerns, put it in there. It would just dissolve them immediately. And it's a reality, I think we have to see that a truth, which the words in the Course in Miracles are communicating. The words aren't the truth, but the words are communicating a truth. Just like the words are like a body, it's a device, but the truth is something beyond that. All right. So we have a body and we talk to each other and we need that device. And we have these words in A Course in Miracles communicating the truth, capital T, but the words aren't the truth. The truth is something beyond that, right? And that's what it's trying to get us to realize. The words are trying to get us to realize the truth that's beyond the words. Now it's talking about this arc of golden light, and then it says, well, it forms a circle. And then that circle expands greater and greater, and then everything inside the circle is light, and this circle just expands until it reaches infinity. It goes to infinity. Now, you know how vast that is? Your mind couldn't even think of it. It's like, okay, Milky Way galaxy, pretty big, don't you think? It's pretty big. It takes light years to get just to one star, right? That's pretty big. And then now that's a whole galaxy. And now there's millions of galaxies. And that's infinity, even beyond that. And that's how much this light goes out, right? And then it says, well, everybody's in there. Even those people you hate, Donald Trump, Adolf Hitler, all those dastardly men that we love to hate, they're all in there. Earthquakes are in there, hurricanes in there. It's all in the light. But we don't see it that way. Because why? We're using judgment, not vision. Like I started out saying, you only have two options here. You use judgment or you use vision. Vision would be Christ's vision, and he lives in that light. He's in there all the time, just like Amma. Amma is in that vast light of continuity. It uses that word continuity, meaning everything is connected as one in this light. And that's where Amma is. And she has so much joy, I can't imagine. She was singing these bhajans, and she would just be so into singing. And then all of a sudden she'd go, and then she'd sing a little more, and then she'd make these gestures that they're not put on. It's like she's feeling the ecstasy of that glory of being in that light, right? She's just feeling it. She's just experiencing it. And she's communicating it. She's right there in front of you, right? She's in her ecstasy in front of you. And where would we have an example of anyone like that? Fortunately, Jesus is very succinct, and he has the language down, and he can communicate without a body if we have the ears to hear. But it's for a different type of a person, like many of us were highly educated, went to colleges, went to, learn this, learn that. So language is very important to us. And he's communicating the same thing Amma is communicating, but through words. So we have to be more attentive to the words, like this one paragraph. I'll probably write that out in calligraphy and frame it. It's just so beautiful. I would recommend you all just read that paragraph. I think it's paragraph 8 in the first section. Let me see. It's paragraph 8 in the first section of chapter 21. That, if we can go in there and stay in there, that would be a meditation. And that would be grace. We would be in grace. It's like I was telling Barbara, the grace is always there, but we are absent. The grace is always present, but we aren't paying attention to it. That's why we don't feel it. Just like this light is everywhere, it said. There's no place this light is not. No person it's not in, no particle, no atom, no particle of dust it's not in. This light is everywhere, into infinity. All right. So awareness of that would be also the same as awareness of the grace. And why are we not in it? We're just not paying attention to it. So when you start to pay attention to that reality, that truth, the grace is closer than your own breath. In fact, you'll have a lot of gratitude for your breath and all the air that's there, an infinite supply. I'm never going to run out of air. thank God. Who put the air there? Well, my creator. Who gave me lungs to use it? My creator. So it's one gratitude after another. One, like Alma, ecstasy after another. And that's the grace. And it just requires that we pay attention. Tarji used to always emphasize attention. Forget about meditation, all these techniques, and stand on your head and breathe this way. No, it's just attention. Just sit and be attentive. That's all you need to do. And when you're reading the Course, just be attentive. Be totally present. And there's the grace. It's immediate. You're in the light. It's immediate. What greater joy could there be than that? So Boli Baba Ki Jai, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this talk, and I'm going to enjoy listening to it myself. So God bless you all.